Hey, church, it's late on Monday night, the 27th of April, and late in the afternoon anyway. And finally getting around. It's been a crazy day as I've been helping take care of the kids and take care of Kristen and leading staff meeting and all kinds of stuff. But finally getting around to the devotional for today. But this is a passage I've been chewing on since Saturday night. John Richardson led our Sunday school class through Titus 3 and had a discussion based on it. And just been kind of processing that along with my daily plan that I've been going through over the last several days. And just a great passage for this season and what we're going through right now. Just the first few verses, Paul is writing to Titus, and Titus, he left in Crete to basically pastor the new church there and young believers. And so he's giving Titus instructions. One of the things that he tells Titus is in starting in verse 1 in chapter 3. He says, remind them, the church, to be submissive to rulers and authorities, to obey, to be ready for every good work, to slander no one, to avoid fighting, and to be kind, always showing gentleness to all people. And man, there's a lot there. You could spend a lot of time just in those short commands, but one of the things that jumps to my mind right now is submissive to rulers and authorities. And you hear people complaining all the time about what one authority or the other says in all this coronavirus stuff. And Paul's telling Titus, look, remind them they need to submit. In that day and time too, if you think about what people were going through, I mean, the church was beginning to be persecuted heavily. In this time, and especially right on the tail end of this, they'd experienced a lot of persecution. And yet, Paul, as he writes this, having himself gone through incredible persecution for the sake of the gospel, tells Titus to remind them to submit to authorities. Now, the authorities are the ones that were attacking Paul, that he was in prison because of. And so, man, for him to say that carries so much weight, especially when we think about today. What we go through with our authorities and is nothing compared to what he and the early church went through. And so he's reminding, and there's more good stuff. That's just one of those things that Paul says there, to obey, to be ready for every good work, to slander no one, to avoid fighting, and to be kind, always showing gentleness to all people. But then I love the change that comes in verse 3, and it's something that we, as the church, if you're a follower of Christ already, that we do well to remember. As Paul reminds Timothy of this, he tells Titus, Titus, you remind Christians, you remind the church this too. For we too were once foolish, disobedient, deceived, enslaved by various passions and pleasures, living in malice and envy, hateful, detesting one another. He's telling Titus, look, you need to tell them to remember that they were lost at one time too, and they acted like they were lost. We all have been there. We all have acted out in those things that he describes there. And so it's easy sometimes, I think, for Christians, especially once we've been Christians for a long time and walking with Christ, if we have any kind of arrogance swell up within us, to look at people who are living in sin and to almost get this arrogance. And Paul says, Titus 1, remind them that they too were once there. But then what he says next is even more important. He says, we also were just that way. We acted in all those sins. But then he says this, but, and that word is so incredibly important, but when the goodness of God and his love for mankind appeared, he saved us. Not by works of righteousness that we had done, but according to his mercy, through the washing of regeneration and renewal by the Holy Spirit. Man, what an awesome reminder for us. That in this time, as we see people that are, acting out against authorities, acting out against rulers, I guess you could say, as people are acting in sin, as the church, man, we need to do two things. Remember who we once were, that apart from the changes happened in our life, we'd be the same way. But two, remember, it's not us. That it is the righteousness of God, that it is him saving us that has changed us. And so, man, church, just encourage you. In this time, continue to be a light for Christ. And the light for Christ that we are does not mean that we tell people, hey, you're wrong, you need to act more like me. But the light and Christ that we are called to be is to point people to the light that shines through us, and that is Christ. And so just to encourage you in this time to reach out to somebody, to be a light for Him, both in responses to people, but also, man, just use this time to reach out to people as you practice this distancing and whatever terminology is used in the next press conference, whether it's social distancing or physical distancing or whatever. Man, don't be distant from people relationally. And so continue to reach out to people and make a difference on the lives of those around you. This is a time that I think as a church we need to be seen. People need to see not us for our sake, for our glory, but they need to see how we're responding, even the way that we're struggling through this thing. And in that, they need to see that we're not perfect and that the difference in us is Christ in us. Have a great night. We're looking forward to this week and walking through these devotionals with you. So keep watching our Facebook page and our YouTube channel as Brian and I put these out this week. And looking forward to worshiping online again this weekend. All right, have a great night.